In a previous video, we've written our validator component. Let's now write the test for it. So under the test unit utilities, let's create the new test. It's going to be called validator test, and it's within the app test unit utilities namespace. Let's extend base case app test. And we are going to start with the public function validation fails with inputs missing values. And let's make it a test again. And we go for rules will be new collection, Illuminate support collection. Make sure that you import this class here. And then we pass through an array of items. So we're going to have a name field, and I want this field to be required, so non-empty. Then we're going to have email field, which will be required, but also needs to be a valid email address. So this vertical line, pipe, or whatever you want to call it, and then email. So these are obviously rules. Here's the name of the input, and on the right hand side within this array, the values of the array are representing the rules. Then we have password, which will be required, but also needs to be confirmed. And as you may remember, we've created this confirmed. If we go back to utilities, validator rules, confirmed will make sure that obviously the password underscore confirmation is present, first of all, and then that the value associated with both of them, the password and password confirmation, are the same. So that's for the password, and then we're going to have this password underscore confirmation, which is just required. So these are the rules. Fields as keys and rules as values of this array, which we are passing through to the collection, creating the collection object instance. And then input will be new collection as well. And this will take name, empty. Then same for email, it's going to be empty, so we as if we didn't put anything within the form fields. Then password is also going to be empty, and then password confirmation is also going to be empty. Okay, let me just create a few new lines again. And now we're going to start with validator equals new validator. This app utilities validator, and we are going to pass rules as first argument and input as second. Again, make sure that you import this validator here. Up here, let's just put this Illuminate package above these custom components that we've created. So we have this validator, we pass the rules and input that we want to validate, and then we go for this assert false when we run validator is valid. This should return false because we passed the rules, and rules say that name is required, so it cannot be empty. Email cannot be required and needs to be of an email type. Password is required and needs to have the confirmed confirmation field as well. We have this password confirmation, which is also required. None of these have any values, so it's definitely going to fail. This is valid method. And if it was for any reason to pass and say that it's true, when we call this is valid method on this validator, then we need to return some message validation returned true with request containing empty inputs. So let's save it. I think we've got the test ready. If we go back to the terminal, let's run PHP unit on this class only. So tests again, let's point to this file, unit utilities validator test, and there we go, one test, one assertion, which is passing, so that's great. And let's also check this assert same, and we are going to pass name required within the array. Then we're going to have email required email, and I'll tell you exactly what it's going to do in just a second. Password will also be as an array required. Then password, oops, not this one, confirmation required. And what should contain this sort of format? Our validator errors property. That's how we would store these errors. If we open our validator app, utilities, validator, this is when we add in these items. So we have name of the field as key, pass to this array, and then we create an array and pass the rule to it. So this is why we have these items wrapped within the array, these square brackets basically. So each of these items, because these obviously are passing for these rules. Okay, so errors, and if it doesn't match, then we're going to say validation errors differ with empty input. So they are not what we expect them to be, in other words. Okay, let's run the test again, and there we go, 1 test, 2 assertions, both of which are passing, which is great. Okay, next test, let's just scroll up a little bit. A public function validation fails with invalid email. Let's just make it a test. And we're going to start with rules equals new collection, support collection, and we pass just one item email, and it's going to be required and email format we expect. So, and then input variable, which is also going to be new collection, and this one will have email but in the incorrect format, so we're just going to put some string. So the required will pass, but the email should fail because it's not a valid email address. And then again, validator equals new validator, this utility is validator, and we pass rules as first argument and then input as the second one. Then we go for this assert false when we run validator is valid, and validation returned true with request containing invalid email address. This message will obviously only going to be visible within our test when we run the test if for any reason this is valid did not return false. Okay, so let's save it, run a test, and there we go. We've got 2 tests, 3 assertions, all of which are passing, which is fantastic. Next, we're going to do the same as we did before. So we are asserting that both of the things are the same. Assert same, and we go for this array. We should get email as email in the array, and that's the only item when we call validator and property errors. So this array should contain this sort of format. Okay, and if it doesn't, then we're going to say validation errors do not match invalid email address. And again, semicolon at the end, save it, run it, and there we go. 4 assertions for 2 tests, and they all passing. Okay, next test. Let's just scroll up, and this one's going to be public function called validation fails with invalid confirmation input. So now we're testing for the confirmation rule test, and we're going to start rules, new collection. And again, if I'm a little bit too fast, please feel free to pause the video, obviously retype everything I do as well to make sure that obviously we on the same page basically. Okay, password, and there we go for required. Then we also need this to be confirmed. In other words, we need this password confirmation field to be present as well. And then password confirmation we want to be required. And then let's just copy this, and we rename these rules here with input. And for password, we are going to put ABC value. And for password confirmation, we're going to have DEF, which should, basically our is valid should fail because obviously they are not matching, they are not the same values, even though we have password confirmation, but the values are different. So we're going to start with validator equals new validator, and then we pass rules as first one, as first argument, and then input as the second one. So now with our validator, we can run the assertion, assert false. When we run validator is valid. And if for any reason it returned true, then obviously something's not right. Validation returned true with request containing invalid confirmation. Save it, terminal, run a test, 3 tests, 5 assertions, everything works fine. Okay, let's do the same as we did before. Let's just assert same as well. This assert same. And what this errors property now should contain, it should contain password confirmed. So validator errors property. And if it doesn't, then validation errors do not match invalid confirmation. Save it, again, back to the terminal, run a test, and we have 6 assertions with 3 tests, all of which are passing. Back to the editor. So that's this test completed. And now let's write the last test we have for our validation component. And let me just scroll up again. Public function validation passes with valid input. Now for a change. Let's make it a test. And we're going to start with rules again. And let me just copy some of this because I can't be typing so many times the same thing. Okay, let's paste it here. We're going to start with name here. We're going to prepend it, required, and then we're going to have email, which is required, and it needs to be email. Then password confirmation required and confirmed, and password confirmation required. And now for the values for input, we're going to go for name, Sebastian Sulinski. For email, we are going to have info ssdtutorials.com. For password, we are going to go for secret, and same for the password confirmation. So everything should validate fine now because we are complying with all these rules. The name has the value, the email has the value, and it is a valid email address. The password has a value, and it has the password confirmation field as well, which both of which are matching the same value. So everything should pass just fine. So now we start with the validator again. Equals new validator. And we are passing rules again as the first argument and input as the second. And then this assert true. When we run validator is valid. And if it didn't validate, then validation returned false with request containing valid input. Let's quickly run this test. There we go, 4 tests, 7 assertions. Let's write the last assertion within this test. This assert count this time should have null items when we try and count items on validator errors. It should be an empty array. So if we use count on it, that should return 0. And validation errors differ with valid input. So basically, if we get something else than 0 from this validator errors when we run count function on it, then obviously there's something wrong. Okay, let's save it, run a test, and there we go. 4 tests, 8 assertions, all of which are passing. And now we know that our validator component is working fine. Okay, we can save and close the test, save this validator, and move to the next video.